Basically, all the living organisms are divided in 5 different kingdoms. They are animal, plant, fungi, protist, and morena. In addition, you can have more information about the graph and about the division of 5 different kingdoms just following the link where you can find a more detailed classification. Generally, we know that millions of living organisms inhabit our planet. So, did you know they are divided in 5 separate kingdoms? Some, like for example, animal and plant, are visible to naked eye, like for example, a plant, gymnosperm, angiosperm, so big plant, or for example, big animal. However, there are also other living organisms. Why living organisms? Because they are composed of cells, like for example, viruses or bacteria that can only be seen under a microscope. So we need a particular tool, we need a particular instrumentation to see bacteria or viruses. Let's now have a look at the characteristic of 5 kingdoms of living organisms. Be careful, all these characteristics can be found in all living organisms. All the species, in fact, have similar characteristics in terms of the way they function and grow. What can we easily detect? We can detect, for example, one characteristic that is very important, that is nutrition. Nutrition that can be divided in autotrophic organism, like for example, makes its own food, or heterotrophics, feed on other living cell. A classical example, for example, for autotrophic living organisms are the plants, because via the photosynthesis they are able to make its own food. Or for example, another example of heterotrophic are the human being, for example, or the animal itself. We cannot provide by ourselves our food, but we need, for example, to eat. Another characteristic is also the cellular organization, or as I told you before, this cellular differentiation. The cellular organization basically can be divided in unicellular, means that organisms that having only one cell, and be careful, in this unicellular organism there is no differentiation, or multicellular. Multicellular are organisms like for example animal, like for example plant as well, or fungi, where there are more cellular, having 2, more, or even million of cells. These million of cells are generally differentiated, means that there is a task division between each kind of cell. And of course, the cell type, as we will see later, generally cells can be divided in 2 broad categories. There we have the eukaryotic cell, where the genetic material is surrounded by membrane, or a prokaryotic cell, where there is no membrane, so there is lacking of membrane. And here again, we can see the same graph where we can appreciate the presence of fungi, plant, animal, protist, and archaeobacteria. However, there are also other characteristics of live human living cell. As I told you before, all these characteristics are essential for living organisms, but however, we can have basically a big difference, a huge difference between living organisms and non-living organisms. So living organisms are all the organisms composed of cells, like for example, protists, plants, animals, bacteria, fungi, and the non-living organisms are everything that is surrounded but without cell, like for example water, soil, air, mineral, and light. Be careful, this is a very important difference, because the presence or not of cell can divide the organism in living or non-living organisms. Other characteristics that we can find in kingdoms of living organisms are, for example, also the respiration, which can be divided into aerobics. Aerobics mean when we need oxygen, or anaerobics means that we do not use oxygen. For example, the human living cell are basically aerobic cells, because we know that we need oxygen in order to survive. And also the reproduction, which can be sexual, asexual or through spores. In case of human being, for example, or animal, we talk about sexual reproduction. In case of, for example, there are some kind of plants which they use the asexual type of reproduction, or in case of some bacteria or some fungi, they use also spores. And also for course the movement. There are self-moving or statics depending of the cells. And now again, time activities. Try to answer to the following questions. Which are the characteristics of the living organisms? And please describe with a practical example and picture if you want a living organism and list all the main characteristics. Please write an essay of maximum 1000 words. Good luck!